The engine loomed in the shadows of Harper's auto shop like a sleeping giant, its rusted curves and jagged edges whispering secrets no one had unraveled. They called it the Beast, a 1967 V8 engine that had defeated every mechanic in Willow Creek, Ohio, for decades. To 19-year-old Ellie Harper, it was more than a machine. It was a ghost, a relic of her father's dreams, and a constant reminder of the void he'd left behind. 6 months ago, Tom Harper's heart had given out, sudden as a snapped timing belt, and the shop, once alive with his booming laugh and the clink of tools, had grown quiet, heavy with grief. Ellie stood before the Beast now, her grease-stained coveralls hanging loose on her frame, her hazel eyes tracing the scars on its metal casing. She could still hear her father's voice. "Every engine's got a story, Ellie. You just gotta listen." But today, the Beast wasn't the only thing testing her. The shop's owner, Mr. Grayson, burst through the door, his polished shoes clicking like a metronome of menace. "Ellie," he sneered, his voice sharp enough to cut through. "Steele, you think you're half the mechanic your father was? Prove it. Fix the Beast by week's end or you're out of a job. And this shop's done." The dare hung in the air like a storm cloud, charged with threat and possibility. Ellie's heart thudded, not with fear, but with a spark of defiance. That felt like her father's hand on her shoulder. Willow Creek wasn't just a town to Ellie, it was a tapestry of lives she'd woven herself into, thread by thread. She was the girl who fixed Mrs. Carter's van so she could drive to her night job at the diner, who patched up Tommy Ruiz's bike so he could race his friends down Maple Street. Her kindness was her currency, spent freely on a town that loved. Her back but couldn't fill the hole her father's death had left. The shop was her last tether to him. Every wrench, every oil stain, every creak of the concrete floor held a memory. Grayson knew it, and his dare wasn't just a challenge. It was a blade aimed at her heart. He wanted the shop gone, sold to some corporate chain that would bulldoze her father's legacy and turn Willow Creek into another faceless strip mall. Ellie's fingers tightened around the rag in her hand, her knuckles whitening. She could walk away, find work at the garage in Millersburg, but that would mean betraying the man who'd taught her to hear an engine's soul. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady as a piston stroke, though her stomach churned. Grayson's lips curled into a smirk, his eyes glinting with the certainty she'd fail. What he didn't know was that Ellie Harper had never met. A challenge she couldn't face, not with a wrench in her hand and her father's memory in her heart. That night, the shop felt like a cathedral, its silence sacred and oppressive. Ellie dragged a work light to the Beast, its harsh glow casting jagged shadows across the engine's surface. The V8 was a labyrinth of seized pistons, corroded valves, and mysteries no manual could solve. Her father had spent years tinkering with it, only to call it impossible, a word he rarely used. Ellie ran her fingers over the cold metal, searching for the story he'd always said was there. She imagined him beside her, his flannel shirt rolled up, his hands steady as he pointed, out a hidden bolt or a worn gasket. "Start with what you know," he'd say, and so she did. She began with the basics, checking the fuel lines, testing the spark plugs, but every step forward revealed another dead end. The carburetor was a mess of gunk, the crankshaft refused to budge, and a strange rattle echoed from deep within, like the Beast was laughing at her. Hours bled into the night, the clock on the wall ticking past midnight, then 2, then 4. Her hands ached, her eyes burned, but she kept going, driven by a need she couldn't name, not just to save the shop, but to prove she was still her father's daughter. The town noticed her absence. Mrs. Carter, who'd never forgotten the night Ellie stayed late to fix her van for free, slipped a Tupperware of oatmeal cookies through the shop's side door. Her note reading, "You've got this, Ellie." Tommy Ruiz, all of 10 years old, left a crayon drawing taped to the workbench. A car with a heart-shaped exhaust cloud, Ellie's name scrawled in wobbly letters. Their kindness was a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge of despair, but the beast was relentless. By the second night, her fingers were raw, her coveralls streaked with grime, and doubt began to creep in like rust. She tightened a bolt too hard, and it snapped, the sharp crack echoing like a gunshot. She froze, her breath hitching. "I'm trying, Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the shop's old heater. That's when she saw it, a faint glint inside the air filter housing, something that didn't belong. Her heart skipped as she reached in, her fingers brushing against a folded piece of paper, yellowed and brittle, tucked away like a secret the beast had guarded for years. Ellie's hands trembled as she unfolded the note, her eyes scanning the familiar scrawl of her father's handwriting. "Ellie, my spark plug," it began, and her throat tightened at the nickname he'd used since she was a girl, chasing him around the shop with a toy wrench. "If you're reading this, you're wrestling with the beast. I never fixed it, not because I couldn't, but because I wanted you to. This engine's like life, broken, stubborn, but worth saving. You've got my hands, but your heart's bigger. Don't fix it for me. Fix it for you." Tears blurred her vision, dripping onto the paper and smudging the ink. The note wasn't a repair guide. It was a revelation, a message from beyond that shifted the ground beneath her. Her father hadn't failed. He'd left the beast for her. A challenge meant to test her strength, to remind her who she was. But there was more. At the bottom of the page was a tiny hand-drawn map, its lines faint but precise, pointing to a spot in the shop's back wall. Ellie's pulse raced. What else had her father hidden? What other secrets did the beast hold? She stumbled to the back of the shop, her boots scuffing the floor, her heart pounding like a misfiring engine. The wall was lined with shelves, cluttered, with oil cans and spare parts, but the map pointed to a panel near the floor, barely noticeable under years of dust. Ellie knelt, her fingers prying at the wood until it gave way with a groan, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a toolbox, its leather cracked but sturdy, the initials TH carved into the lid. Her breath caught as she opened it, revealing a set of tools unlike any she'd seen, custom prototypes, each one gleaming despite the dust, their handles engraved with her father's mark. A second note was taped inside. "For the impossible jobs. Love, Dad." Ellie's fingers closed around a wrench, its weight perfect in her hand, as if it had been made for her. She felt a surge of something new. Not just hope, but certainty. Her father hadn't just left her a challenge. He'd given her the tools to conquer it, but the beast was still waiting, and the clock was ticking. Grayson's deadline loomed, and the shop's fate hung in the balance. Ellie returned to the engine, the toolbox at her side, her father's notes clutched like a talisman. The tools felt alive, guiding her hands as she worked, each turn of the wrench a conversation with her father. She attacked the beast with a focus she hadn't known she possessed, dismantling parts she'd avoided, listening for the story her father swore was there. The rattle she'd heard before revealed itself, a loose bearing, hidden deep in the engine's core, that no one else had found. She replaced it with a part from her father's toolbox, her movements sure and swift. But the beast fought back, its complexities unfolding like a riddle. A fuel line was clogged with something strange, not just grime, but a residue that hinted at a history she couldn't yet grasp. Every fix led to a new problem, each one testing her patience, her skill, her heart. By the third night, she was running on coffee and willpower, her body aching but her spirit unbroken. The town's support grew. Mr. Jenkins, the recluse who rarely left his porch, sent a thermos of soup with a note. Tom would be proud. But pride wasn't enough. Grayson's smirk haunted her, and the thought of losing the shop, of losing her father all over again, felt like a weight on her chest. The fourth night brought a storm, rain pounding the shop's tin roof like a drum roll. Ellie worked alone, the world outside fading to a blur. She was close. She could feel it. The beast's pieces were coming together, its story clearer now. A racing engine abandoned after a crash, left to rot, but never forgotten. Her father's. Tools made the impossible possible, but time was slipping away. As dawn broke, she tightened the last bolt, her hands shaking with exhaustion and hope. She turned the key, and the beast sputtered, coughed, then roared, a deep, primal sound that shook the shop's walls. Ellie stumbled back, her eyes wide, her heart soaring. She'd done it. The beast was alive. But the victory felt incomplete, like a song missing its final note. The note, the tools, the map. There was more to this story, something her father hadn't told her. As the engine's rumble filled the air, Ellie's eyes fell on the deed, tucked in the toolbox's lining, its edges worn but its words clear. Her father's signature stared back at her, and the truth hit like a lightning strike. The shop was never Grayson's to take. The beast hadn't just been a challenge, it had been a key to her father's final gift. The beast's roar filled Harper's auto shop like a heartbeat, its rumble shaking the concrete floor and rattling the tools on Ellie Harper's workbench. The 1967 V8 engine, once a silent monument to failure, was alive, its voice a testament to Ellie's grit and her father's faith. At 19, grease-streaked and exhausted, Ellie stood frozen, the key still in her hand, her hazel eyes wide with disbelief. She'd done the impossible, brought the beast back to life with her father's, custom tools and a note that had cracked her heart open. But the folded deed she'd found in the hidden toolbox, its edges worn but her father's signature unmistakable, was a bombshell that changed everything. The shop, her father's legacy, the heart of Willow Creek, Ohio, wasn't Mr. Grayson's to sell. It was hers. The realization hit like a spark in a fuel line, igniting a fire of hope and fear. Grayson's dare to fix the beast by week's end had been a trap to push her out. But this deed was her weapon, her shield, her father's final gift. As the engine's growl echoed, Ellie clutched the paper, her pulse racing. Dawn was breaking, and Grayson would be here soon. The fight for the shop was far from over, and the truth she held could either save everything or tear it apart. Ellie's hands trembled as she smoothed the deed on the workbench, its faded ink telling a story she hadn't expected. Her father, Tom Harper, had bought the shop outright years ago, a secret he'd kept even from her. Why hide it? Why bury it in a toolbox with the beast? The questions gnawed at her, each one a loose bolt she couldn't tighten. She remembered the nights her father spent in the shop, not just fixing cars, but talking to customers like they were family, his laughter filling the air like exhaust. He'd built more than a business. He'd built a community. Ellie's eyes stung as she traced his signature, her fingers lingering on the loops of his T. She could almost hear him. "You've got my hand, Sparkplug, but your heart's bigger." The note she'd found in the beast had been his voice from beyond, urging her to fight. But this deed was something else, a mystery wrapped in courage, a puzzle she had to solve before Grayson's deadline crushed her. The shop's door creaked, and Ellie spun, shoving the deed into her coveralls. It was only Mrs. Carter, her gray, hair tucked under a scarf, carrying a thermos of coffee and a worried smile. "Heard the beast from down the street," she said, her voice warm but edged with concern. "You okay, Ellie?" Ellie forced a nod, her throat tight. Mrs. Carter had been one of her father's first customers, a single mom who'd relied on him to keep her van running for her diner shifts. Ellie had fixed that van for free last month, staying late under the hood while Mrs. Carter's kids slept in the back seat. "I did it," Ellie said, gesturing to the humming engine. "But it's not over." She didn't mention the deed, not yet. Mrs. Carter's eyes softened, and she pressed the thermos into Ellie's hands. "Your dad always said you'd surprise us all," she said, then hesitated. "Grayson's been talking at the diner, says he's got buyers lined up, Big chain from Columbus. Ellie's stomach dropped. The corporate vultures were circling, ready to pave over her father's legacy. She thanked Mrs. Carter, her mind racing. She needed a plan, and she needed it now. Word of the beast's revival spread like wildfire through Willow Creek. By mid-morning, the shop was a hive of voices and footsteps. Tommy Ruiz, the 10-year-old who'd left a crayon drawing of a heart-shaped car, burst in, his eyes wide as he stared at the beast. "It's alive!" he shouted, his voice cracking with awe. Behind him came Mr. Jenkins, the town recluse, leaning on his cane, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile. "Knew you had it in you," he muttered, his voice gruff but proud. Neighbors poured in, farmers, teachers, the librarian who'd slipped Ellie car manuals when she was a kid. They brought muffins, casseroles, stories of her father's kindness. The time he fixed a tractor for free during harvest season. The night he drove a stranded family home in a snowstorm. Each story was a thread, weaving Ellie's resolve tighter. But Grayson's shadow loomed. He'd be here by noon, expecting her to fail, ready to lock the doors and hand the shop to strangers. Ellie's fingers brushed the deed in her pocket, its weight both a comfort and a challenge. She couldn't just wave it in his face. Not yet. She needed proof it was real, and she needed the town behind her. Ellie slipped away to the shop's back office, a cramped room smelling of oil and old coffee. Her father's desk was a mess of receipts and sketches, but she remembered a locked drawer he'd never let her open. Her hands shook as she pulled out the toolbox's smallest tool, a tiny key, engraved with TH, tucked in a hidden flap. It fit the drawer perfectly. Inside was a folder thick with papers, bank records, a loan paid off years ago, and a notarized copy of the deed. Her father hadn't just owned the shop, he'd fought to keep it, even when money was tight. A sticky note on the folder read, "For Ellie, when you're ready." Her chest tightened, tears threatening to spill. He'd planned this, known she'd find it, trusted her to carry on. But there was something else, a photograph of her father, with a man she didn't recognize, standing by the beast when it was new, its chrome gleaming. On the back, in her father's scrawl, "The race we never finished." The beast wasn't just an engine, it was a piece of her father's past, a story she'd only begun to uncover. The shop's bell jingled and Ellie's heart lurched. Grayson. His tailored suit looked out of place among the grease and grit, his smirk sharp as a blade. "Well, Harper," he said, his voice dripping with mockery, "let's see this miracle." The crowd parted, their murmurs tense. Ellie stepped forward, the deed burning a hole in her pocket, but she didn't pull it out. Instead, she gestured to the beast, its rumble steady and strong. "Turn it off," Grayson snapped, unimpressed. "You think one engine saves this dump?" Ellie's jaw clenched, but before she could speak, Tommy tugged her sleeve, his eyes wide. "Tell him, Ellie," he whispered. "Tell him what it means." The crowd leaned in, their faces a mix of hope and defiance. Ellie took a breath, her father's note echoing in her mind. This wasn't just about the engine or the deed, it was about Willow Creek, about the people who'd carried her through her grief. She climbed onto a crate, her boots scuffing the wood, and faced the crowd. "This engine," she said, her voice shaking but clear, "was my dad's impossible dream. He left it for me, not to fix for him, but to show me I could do anything." Her eyes locked on Grayson's, unflinching. "He also left something else." She pulled the deed from her pocket, holding it high. "This shop isn't yours, Mr. Grayson, it's mine. My dad bought it, paid for it, loved it, and I'm not letting you take it." The crowd gasped, then erupted, voices overlapping in shock and cheers. Grayson's face turned red, then pale. "That's a lie," he sputtered. But Ellie held up the notarized copy, its seal glinting in the light. "Check the records," she said. "It's real." Mrs. Carter stepped forward, her diner apron still on. "We're with you, Ellie," she said, and the crowd roared agreement. Tommy waved his drawing, Mr. Jenkins banged his cane, and the shop vibrated with their support. Grayson lunged for the deed, but Ellie was faster, stepping back as Mr. Jenkins blocked his path, his cane a quiet threat. "You're done here," the old man growled. Grayson's eyes darted, calculating, then narrowed. "This isn't over," he hissed, storming out, the door slamming behind him. The crowd surged around Ellie, their hands on her shoulders, their voices a chorus of pride. But Ellie's heart was still racing. The deed was real, but Grayson wouldn't give up easily. She needed to protect the shop, not just for herself, but for the town that had become her family. That's when she made her decision, the one that would change everything. "This shop isn't just mine," she said, her voice rising over the crowd's murmurs. "It's ours. Starting today, Harper's Auto Shop will offer free repairs for anyone who can't pay. We'll teach kids like Tommy to fix their own bikes, their own futures. This is my dad's legacy, and it's yours too." The shop exploded with cheers, but the emotional peak came at dusk. As the town gathered outside, the beasts rumble, a backdrop to their celebration. They brought tables, food, music, turning the parking lot into a festival. Tommy ran to Ellie holding a new drawing, this one of her, wrench in hand, the beast glowing behind her, a heart-shaped spark in its center. "You're my hero," he said, his voice small but fierce. Ellie knelt, pulling him into a hug, her tears mixing with his. The crowd circled them, their faces lit by lanterns and starlight. Mrs. Carter shared her diner's pie, Mr. Jenkins told stories of her father's wild youth, and the librarian promised to archive the shop's history. Ellie looked at the sign, Harper's Auto Shop, and felt her father's presence in the warm breeze. The beast had been a bridge, not just to her father, but to the town that held her up. Grayson might fight back, but Ellie wasn't alone. She'd fixed the impossible, not just with tools, but with a heart that refused to break. As Willow Creek danced under the stars, Ellie knew the greatest repairs were to the bonds that held them together, and those would never rust.